are royalties, if there are payments, if there are shared measures of prosperity, I think it's a good thing. The Greenlanders don't like Denmark. Okay, I've got a different attitude toward Greenland, and it's different from many different analysts. And here's mine. NATO has said that they will defend Greenland if there's an invasion. So Trump might do a quiet invasion and provoke NATO and essentially dismantle NATO because they won't follow through in the midst of the other European Union problems. So NATO is pretty much occupied by the war in Ukraine, and I don't think they have the interest to get involved in a Danish territory called Greenland, which is very large. Greenland is like, I don't know, I'm just guessing, 8 times larger than Denmark. Of course, it only has a few populated areas. For those who don't know, it's got a population of 50,000, give or take. I think it's a little less. So if they offer every one of them $1 million, it's $50 million off the printing press in Washington, D.C. and New York. $50 billion. That's a small price, and you wouldn't even notice it on the U.S. government deficit. You wouldn't even notice it. We do 1,000 billion every 100 days. All right. There's more to Greenland. There are other metals. There's structural metals there. There are a lot of different metals there. It's a big island. But it's got something that's unusual and controversial. It's got something called the Ark. It's like a big library stored way down underground, an Ark with tens of thousands of human DNA samples for a recovery of the human race in case our planet is killed. We've got a fail-safe recovery with the Ark of human DNA, and that is in Greenland. That's not in the news much.
Is President Trump dismantling the deep state and their drug operations? Is the wreckage of the cabal taking place? How extensive might this dismantling and wrecking be? What other crimes against humanity are being interrupted, in your opinion?
Yes, he is. And what I find interesting is that he's not talking about it much. He's just doing it. He's not announcing what gigantic drug problem the United States has. He's not advertising that we have 100,000 dead people per year from fentanyl overdose, which is twice the official Vietnam total war death count. He's not talking about what nations are doing the drug export to our country. He's just dismantling it. He's not telling you that Mexico is deeply involved in drug export to our country. He's just saying that we're at war with the cartel. And in the news, they talk more about child trafficking than they do drugs. It's okay to talk about child trafficking, but it's not widely done to talk about drug trafficking because it points out that we've got drug buyers in the United States, that your next door neighbor might be a cokehead, that your worker, the co-worker in your office might get high on coke every night and not do work well. Okay, we've got drug operations in Venezuela. We've got drug operations in in Mexico. I believe we got some drug operations coming out of Iran, but that's not well discussed, well advertised. How extensive might the dismantling be? Well, I think a lot depends on what happens with Davos, and we'll get to that question in a few minutes. But I think it's basically child trafficking and adrenochrome trafficking and harvesting, you know, the blood, the adrenal gland infusion into blood that, you know, Mark Zuckerberg loves so much of Facebook. Anyone who makes a Facebook account, you're just supporting a guy who is involved with adrenochrome. I think it's a really good reason to stop all Facebook. I'd like to see Facebook shut down. There are a lot of different crimes of humanity involved when they get involved with drugs, they realize, well, we can do this with amphetamine. We got the same channels. We can do this with fentanyl. We got the same channels. We can do this with adrenochrome. We'll just have to get a different, importer and line that up. We can do this with human organs, for God's sake. Okay. Anyway, once they get involved, then they start thinking like Venezuela does. We can do hired murders. We can do hired kidnapping for ransom. This is what Venezuela is all about. And people who are, and I got some good clients who think we're involved way too far. We went too far with Venezuela, and I don't think so. I think we need to dismantle our American hemisphere version of Ukraine. I think a lot of these networks, and some of them are state-sponsored, like in Venezuela, they need to be smashed. They need to be interrupted. They need to be exposed, and their leaders need to be imprisoned or executed.
Everywhere you seem to turn in the U.S., illegal immigrants involved in massive fraud against the government. What do you believe is happening? To what level of illegals in the millions will be deported during the Trump 2 term?
The Somalis are not the only ones. There are others from North Africa, like Tunisia, Libya, Algeria. There are Syrians. There are a lot of Syrians in the United States. Some were illegals. There are a lot of illegals that came from Central America, Salvadorans, Hondurans. I don't hear anything out of Costa Rica, but they came through the Darien Gap. I had a client who owned property in the Darien Gap. That's a coastal Atlantic side trail through Costa Rica and Panama. What I believe is happening is that the U.S.-based Democrat Party leaders and governors are heavily involved in establishing fronts with the immigrants. And Minnesota is a showcase. The three that I'm aware of are daycare centers, learning centers like education centers, because the Somalis are just unbelievably dumb. They're dumber, an order of magnitude dumber than the dumbest person in your grade school class. Okay, but also elderly care, daycare, elderly care, counseling for adjusting to a new environment, especially with snow, because they came from Somalia, where the average temperature is about 90. So they're getting set up by the Democrats and say, you just take care of the learning center or the daycare center, and you just sit there and it'll be empty, but we'll give you we'll give you $100,000 a month. What ignorant Somali trash would turn that down? Now, I didn't say all Somalis are trash. I said what ignorant Somali trash would turn that down. I don't think very many. Anyway, I think it's collusion, and what you have is useful immigrant idiots who tend to be corrupt, and they're being recruited by the Democrats. These are almost all Democrat projects. So the Democrats are stealing money and putting it into the system and bringing about votes and having clowns like Waltz, who just turned down, stepped down. He resigned. Waltz resigned. Why? Maybe so he won't be prosecuted for grand larceny and fraud. But I think it's only a waiting period before it's prosecution for larceny, grand larceny, and fraud. So I believe the immigrants are useful idiots for the Democrats. And it's all through California, too. Except in California, it's a little bit different. It's a lot more sophisticated. The governor's involved in stealing almost every fund that's around. Stealing from the fund for masks, stealing for the very large $5 billion, $6 billion fund for homeless, and now stealing for the funds for Palisade fires, where not a single person has been relocated, not a single home has been rebuilt. It's all stolen. So, useful idiots where they're needed. And, Governor Newsom of California, he doesn't need a whole lot. He's pretty good with his own team. But, maybe we'll find soon that there's some welfare fraud in California with Somalis or Latin Americans or North Africans. We're bringing in the dregs of the world. We're bringing in the most uneducated, the most ignorant, the most unassimilatable, and non-Christians. And this is Obama, and he's wrecked our country. He did a really good job. He was the third shot. The first shot was Clinton, the second shot was baby Bush, the third shot was Obama. He wrecked a lot. We're going to need 10 years to repair the United States.
Election fraud is being exposed all over the place. Do you expect this corruption in politics to be halted?
Not right away. A good test is going to be the midterm elections, and that's 10 months away. It's going to be interesting. I'm not too optimistic, but what Trump needs to do is to clean out some of these Democrat states where the governors have all the different corrupt election mechanics in place. He needs to make progress this summer before the campaigns get rolling fast and heavy. I think we will continue to have some Democrat fraud with the elections for the midterms. But what is more likely is grand exposure of the Democrats for their fraud, the Democrats for their Marxist policies, the Democrats for their, let's just say, support for the migrants. In other words, support for the violence, support for the fraud, support for the unassimilatable, migrant trash. Who's in favor of migrant trash? Only the Democrats in the sanctuary states. Okay. There's going to be exposure, and there's a new verb that's come out. Trump has said, well, we're going to primary that guy. In other words, we're going to bring up a candidate on the Republican side who beats him in the primary because we're going to expose his fraud. We're going to expose his pro-migrant attitude. We're going to expose his attitude toward this, that, and the other that is anti-American. And I think we need to really expose the Democrats for their hidden Marxist policies. Oh, I got to mention something, and maybe we'll get to Europe in a minute. But Ursula von der Leyen, I guess she's the president of the EU, she said, free speech is a virus and we need a vaccine. We've had too much. It's very disruptive. Yeah, especially when it's used to call her out for her corruption. All right, next.
Jerome Powell is under investigation for lying to Congress. What are the hidden dynamics with respect to Powell and the Fed? Could this be the beginning of the end for the Fed?
This is a very delicate and complicated issue. I heard 2 years ago that there was a war between the European banks and the American banks, and they were arguing over monetary policy like interest rates. Let's just say, not interference. They're arguing over policy for altering and controlling currencies, control of currencies, just involvement with that. I can't think of the right word. And Powell came from BlackRock, and BlackRock was more aligned with the Europeans. It's complicated, and I will describe this more in the January newsletter, but Powell came from BlackRock, and BlackRock was more loyal to the Europeans. So when he was selected as the Fed head, I concluded that a truce had been made between the Europeans and the Americans among the banker set. But what we've seen now is Powell refusing to cut interest rates, and I believe there's a lot of legitimacy for this because the U.S. government has all this debt, and when you increase the supply, you need to tighten the rates. So what I like to describe, Jim, is something really in simple terms. He can't lower the rates because we have so much debt. We can't raise the rates because we're in a depression, and it's not recognized. So he doesn't want to lower the rates because we've got so much debt. If we lower the rates, we'll have very poor Treasury auctions because we already have bad auctions. Do we want worse auctions? Do we want a public statement that we're buying our own debt because the auctions are a string of failures? Okay, it's very complicated. I don't even know exactly what the lie was, but gosh, find me a banker and an executive that doesn't lie. Oh my gosh. What banker of power does not lie? None. Okay. So there's a battle between Trump and Powell. And I think Powell is hanging on, and I don't know if he's announced that he's going to resign or resign in a month or two or something like that. But I don't think Powell's going to last much longer because he's going to be threatened. They're going to threaten him and threaten his pension and you name it. They'll threaten him with something. I don't think they'll threaten him with a kill because that's not the way Trump operates. That's the way the Democrats operate. So could this be the beginning of the end for the Fed? I think the end of the Fed was about 4 years ago. And Americans don't really understand this, but there are shareholders among the Wall Street banks for ownership of the Fed. The old guard is gone. They're back in Switzerland. They don't own the Fed anymore. I mean, Warburg and all those other guys, they don't own the Fed anymore. They might make phone calls. They'll call Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan and say, we want this, we want that. But the days where the old owners and the board could issue themselves a $23 trillion set of loans at 0.25%, like they did during the Lehman crisis in 2008, those days are over. So it's the end of the Fed a while ago, and we have not yet taken control from the BlackRock representative.
What do you think President Trump wants to get accomplished before this year's midterms?
Expose the Democrats for fraud and Marxism, and maybe dismantle the fraudulent machines in certain states, Arizona, Illinois, New York, California. Now, wouldn't it be remarkable if we saw a huge number of Democrats for the Congress out of California because they eliminated the fraudulent machines? Okay, that's what I think. Exposure is really important. People need to know what the Democrats are. It's like a union of the Satanists, the narcos, and the communists. And people who vote for them don't even know who they're voting for. They're that stupid.
Who do you think the top candidates will be for president and vice president on the Republican ticket in 2028?
I think it'll be Vance for president. He was picked for more than the role that he's serving now. As for the rest, I don't really know. I don't know. It's a bit of a carnival. I don't know. Vance will be at least one. Sorry.
Is artificial intelligence just next-level computer programming put into wider usage to accomplish the cabal agenda in a secretive manner? What is AI in your view, and what are the risks for humanity?
Okay, I have a bachelor's degree in computer science, and the parts that I loved the most and focused the most on was programming, and that included machine language, assembler they call it, macros. I really like the macros. They're basically subroutines. What I learned was that one course I had, it was called data structures, and I enjoyed the heck out of that. I won't give any examples, but there are certain structures that you can build in a program, and it's very helpful for accomplishing the goal of the program. It's a construct. And what I concluded was, this is the basics of AI. And then when I was in graduate school, I had a friend who was more involved in simulation, and I thought, well, this is pretty cool, the simulation. I can see how that works. But I had trouble with certain elements of simulation. I had no trouble with elements of random number generation. I did a whole summer of research regarding random number generation for things like, F-tests and analysis of variance when the underlying assumptions were not met. In other words, the error was not normal. We altered the error. Okay, that's simulation. But AI now, it's far more than next-level computer programming. Right now, it's more like structures and rules and learning to add to the knowledge base, add constructs. Like you could get an AI machine to eventually conclude, for instance, that Canada's ruling party is closely allied and under control by the Chinese Communist Party. But when you start out, the AI tool would not conclude that. It would build toward that and make a conclusion and make a platform and a construct and defend it with the information that it used to come up with that construct. That's pretty heavy duty. That's not just computer programming. That's structures, rules, and new construct building. All right. Is the cabal? Yeah, I think the cabal is using AI in a secretive manner. They're telling us, the labor force, for instance, we're really just going to enhance the labor market. Now, there might be 10 people who did that job before in that department, but now there are 8 because you're all using AI tools, and you could do the job for 10 people, and we're going to give you little raises, but not too big because we need to pay for the AI tools, the robots. It's not robots. Robots are the physical part that you see walking around and pretending to be human or whatever, pretending to be a dog, pretending to be a soldier on wheels or whatever. What I find interesting is that eventually I believe the cabal wants to remove the people, and you're seeing this in a big way at Amazon. You're seeing this in a big way at Facebook. You're seeing it at Microsoft. It's the cabal corporations that are replacing the largest numbers of workers. It's not a few thousand. It's tens of thousands at those 3 corporations. They're not enhancing the people. They're replacing them. They're telling us that they're enhancing, but the cabal wants to replace. If they've got replacements that are robots and they got AI working instead of a huge body of humans, they can give them illegal orders and program the robots and the AI devices not to object. That's really important because regular workers have a conscience. A programmed machine like a robot does not. I'll give you just one ugly example. You might have robots doing, taking human bodies and doing separation of organs, and maybe just very old bodies and maybe bodies that they abduct. In other words, organ harvesting. A robot won't mind. A human might. They might not be able to find enough humans to do something like that. Or to make cocaine, to do the stamping in the little ponds that you see in movies with a guy with wild eyes who's just going bang, bang, bang with the legs down, up, down, up, down, up. Okay, they're on cocaine. Okay, you could do that with a robot. It won't mind. Just, add a little oil, make sure it's got its battery loaded up, and you're good to go. Okay, we're going to see some problems with AI because humans are going to wake up and realize we're being replaced and not enhanced. And then you get the questions all over again like 5 years ago. We need depopulation because we got too many people. And one of the examples I give is, what about a Central American guy who really dropped out of school at age 12, and he's, working as a manual laborer, and he's got 8 kids? We don't want that. So we need to educate better. This is going to be very complicated in a few years because we're going to be right back where we were before the vaccine to reduce the population.
Is Europe on the verge of a breakup of their European Union? What's the conflict at the center of it? More than one conflict? Which nations are the renegades?
Tough question. Yes, I think it's on the verge of a breakup. I believe that Ursula von der Leyen is at the center of controversies. I believe we are going to see some direct challenges. It could come from Italy. It could come from Hungary. Each one has a bit of a firebrand leader. It's, what's her name? Giorgia Meloni in Italy and Viktor Orban in Hungary, and they're each my heroes. Heroine, hero, whatever. This is going to end badly for Brussels. Okay, there are 3 issues that Italy brings up, and they are, I think, key to most of the problems. See if I can remember them. The first is revenue sharing. Van der Leyen is acting like a dictator now, saying to Italy, you need to behave better, quit arguing with us, be a good poodle dog on our leash, and we'll give you your share of the money from the European Union. Meloni is saying F you. The second issue is migrants. They're arriving on the Italian shore. By the way, take a look at the map. They've got a huge shore, and it's very close to North Africa. So they're getting thousands upon thousands every year. Maybe